I'm Nick von Wackerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 17 minutes. Before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 89 of the VonDubCast. This is a very special one for me. Have a rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, on the podcast today for you guys. And having a rabbi on the podcast was something that I looked into before I even had recorded the first episode. The Jewish faith and Judaism is something that has really impacted me over the last, I'd say probably 4 or 5 years, when I really started to get into podcasts and listening to these people have in-depth conversations. I just started to find that so many of these people I really looked up to and that I really appreciated their ideas and how their mind worked. They all had that kind of same running thread of growing up in a Jewish household and just some of the things that come through. And I'd always had just written off religion, as you guys have probably heard me talk about ad nauseum on any other podcast when religion comes up, of just kind of me losing my faith with religion without being able to question it. But then and kind of painting all religions from that point with that brush and just kind of putting them into a compartment in my brain where they're just silly people that don't need to be looked at, and their thoughts don't need to be grappled with and compared against your own, because they're silly. They believe in this nonsense, right? And I just found that these people that were so vastly superior to me in intellect really held a special place for their faith and how that serves them and how it allows them different lenses to view the world through that have them at such a that I'm personally at such a disadvantage not to have. So it was always something that really spoke to me, and that over the last year and a half or whatever it's been since starting the podcast, that has only grown, and more people that I listen to, and even one of my spiritual leaders that was kind of just talking about religion in a whole different sense, not through the lens of Judaism, just about, kind of the way I talk about it a lot of the time, of just it being the universe and just consciousness and how everything is kind of one and how God is in everything. And then to find out that he actually grew up Jewish, I was like, oh, you son of a bitch, you held that from me, right? And that kind of clicked in a lot of bells, because I really listened to him, and I loved that he would talk about it not through any one specific lens of one religion. He would always bounce between Buddhism and some Judaism and Hinduism and all these things, and just kind of taking the common threads. And I really appreciated that, and it really spoke to me personally. But then to find out that where all that comes from, I think is a base of this. So it was always something I was very curious about, but I also was worried because I don't want to ever offend anybody, and I don't want to, feel like just an outsider trying to steal secrets, or, like when you believe yourself that your intentions are pure and that the curiosity is pure, and you have those experiences, it's hard to explain that to people. And I hope that comes through in this podcast. And so anyways, and then something else I talk about a lot with this podcast is just kind of the universe and how weird it is, and how throughout this process, just weird things seem to happen and fall into place, and certain people I meet and introductions that get made that it's just like, why? Like, in a million years, how would that ever happen? And this is one of those where I was trying really hard to find somebody that would be able to speak on Judaism, and it's a little bit of a touchy subject if it's not somebody's everyday bread and butter that they talk about all the time. You don't really want to ask people about their faith just offhand unless you have a good relationship with them. So I always thought, well, if I could find a rabbi that'd be willing to come on and speak, then that's their bread and butter. They'd be able to do that, and I wouldn't be offending them. But I looked up rabbis in Grand Prairie, Alberta, and Slave Lake. It was a little bit hard to find. I didn't even know how to start that approach. So I'd almost gotten to the point where I'd given up. And then I had a girl, Sora, on the podcast, and she was just fascinating in all these different ways. And then after the podcast, we just kept talking, and somehow this came up. And I said, like, oh, I've always wanted to have a rabbi on the podcast. And she said, well, my dad's a rabbi. And I said, wow, really? And I said, would you think he'd ever want to come on? Like, I don't know if he even knows what a podcast is. And she said, maybe, I could ask, but actually my brother's a rabbi too, and he would most likely come on. And I thought, well, it's just so funny how I just given up. Like, it was literally days before I was just like, you know what, it's going to come when it's going to come. I'm going to stop searching. If it works, it works. I'm just going to stop, spending time going down this path. It'll work out when it works out. And then days later, this falls in my lap. So we scheduled just a little half-hour introductory call with Akiva just to get to know each other and kind of tell them what I'm about, and just hopefully what I was hoping to get was just to put them at ease that, this is genuine curiosity and this is coming from a really good place, and I'm not, trying to put them on the spot or trying to, do any gotcha journalism. It's just really had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask. And we probably spoke, it's supposed to be just a little 5-minute, we spoke for half an hour, and even still this day after doing the pod, that half an hour conversation we had was one of the most special, eye-opening, and powerful conversations. Just sometimes I found with this podcast, certain conversations almost seem to fill you with electricity and just these ideas and these connections. It seems like there's these big ideas that I grapple with all the time, and I'm just missing, like I have them 90% of the way there, and there's 10% that I'm missing that doesn't connect it back in with the whole. And I just found every couple of seconds, Akiva was just hitting me with these pieces and these proverbs that were just connecting things left, right, and center. It was just such a cool experience that I was just ecstatic to get him on the podcast. So I think we did it early morning, maybe because of the time difference. So I woke up early one day and we sat down for an hour, which you guys are about to hear. And it was honestly, guys, one of the best conversations I've ever had. It's funny now because a couple weeks later, I don't even remember much of the specifics of what we talked about. But like I always say, I remember how it made me feel. And it was just weeks that stuck with me, and just different things that were, like I said, it was the same experience as that first introductory call where just pieces are falling together all the time. But then it didn't stop after the podcast. Thinking on it, it really opened so many doors that pieces were falling into place for weeks afterwards. It was, oh yeah, I see how that connects in with that. And it was just so cool. And to see kind of how I back-ended myself into this topic of through all these different religions, and how, most religions at the very core are almost the same thing. They just have their own different spin on it. And to get there and to see how, even though Akiva is so entrenched isn't the right word. That is, it makes it sound so rough, but so deep within this one lens of Judaism, but to still be open and to understand all those things that I was coming from, and to see that he has a real true understanding of all these different things and how they interconnect, and that it's not one above all, and that so many things are much more similar than they are apart, and that language is so tough and makes it seem, language can make things seem like they're completely different when they're the exact same thing. And it was just such a fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm very excited for people to hear it. I think this might end up being one of those podcasts where it speaks to me more personally than maybe everybody else, but I'm sure there's going to be a couple people out there that hear this one and it really hits them in that sweet spot. So yeah, excited for you guys to hear this one. Just to give you guys a little bit of update, like I like to do in these intros sometimes. Last time you probably heard from me like this was on that little solo podcast I did on my way out to BC for my sister's wedding and that little Vancouver trip, which I just got back yesterday from. And I was in a pretty dark place, and I think seeing family and seeing friends and the people that had listened to the podcast were really worried about me. And I think they had a right to. And I think I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm still not right as rain. That's something that is a long journey. But I think what people were hearing in that conversation was just that I was kind of reaching a breaking point of I needed to make a change, and I had a lot of things in front of me. We had the wedding, we had a lot of things, but I think hard conversations needed to be had. And now I've had some of those, and I feel a lot better. I feel like I'm on the right track forward to getting there. And I just wanted everyone to know that. And I guess going back to that same thing about the universe and how weird things are. So I recorded that episode, that little solo pod on the Coquihalla Highway, driving out to Vancouver. And as soon as I kind of hit stop on the record button and just kind of settled in and just thought about what I just said, and am I really going to put that out to everybody? The traffic started to jam up, and what's going on here? But the Coquihalla Highway, anybody that knows that, this can happen all the time, right? So then I figured, either there's construction or there's a wreck. But I started to see people get out of their vehicles, and whenever you see people start getting out of the vehicles, buckle in. It could be a couple hours, and it is hot. So I grabbed the dog, walk up to my girlfriend's family that were a couple of cars up ahead, and bullshitted with them. But we could see this beautiful creek kind of running along the highway, but it was such thick brush you couldn't get down to it. So we're kind of pissing around for 20 minutes, trying to find places to go to wash them or whatever. And I thought, hey, that kind of looks like a little trail, but nobody else noticed it. So I just kind of snuck off, jumped the barrier, and just snuck down. I got down to this little creek, and maybe I'll put some pictures of this in the release of the episode. But it was just this beautiful natural cut rock that was just like this smooth, almost like water slides through, and it was just crystal clear and freezing cold. And I decided to just strip down to the skivvies and go in for a swim, and it was such an amazing experience just to get metaphorically all that stuff off my chest and just kind of cleanse yourself from all those things that you've been carrying through the podcast. And then to have, minutes, no, probably maybe an hour later, this just amazing physical experience of getting in this just freezing cold mountain water and just flowing down by yourself, just being alone with your thoughts. It was so amazing and exactly what I needed in that moment. And then again, to, that kind of theme just kept going. Then the wedding, everything was going wrong with the wedding, and I'm going to have Courtney on, I think, I wanted to have Courtney and Liam on. This was going to be their wedding gift to right after the wedding to podcast and talk about all the stories and get it all out there, but we just didn't have time, and Liam had to get back to medical school right away, so he kind of left out. But I'm going to have her on to tell all the in-depth stories, so I'll try and maybe not get too into detail here, but there was a lot going wrong trying to set up the wedding. It seemed like nothing was going right and that everything was against us. It was smokier than all hell. You couldn't see anything across the lake, and we're really worried. And just how things fell into place was so beautiful, and how beautiful the wedding was, and how it couldn't have gone any more perfect, and all the family and just the connections that it seems like, I'm speaking personally, that I needed, but I think everybody needed a little bit of piece of that, a little bit of normality of what that wedding brought for us all, and also a bit of humbling too, just to see, because Liam is Australian, and with all the COVID stuff, he couldn't have all the people that he wanted there to be there, and just to see the strength that he exudes and goes through, and that was highlighted. I think you always try and highlight that. You're never going to fully embody those feelings and those emotions that somebody goes through, but I feel like it was also very humbling to see that, of just what strength some people are going through, and just all the shit that you deal with. There's always people going through something harder, right? So I loved all that. And then past that, just the reunions of these people I hadn't seen in forever, because that place in Penticton is my favorite place on earth. It's my happy place. I can't imagine anywhere else in the world I'd ever rather be than in Penticton, at our campsite there. And just how many people I grew up with that also had that experience and would come to the campsite. And there's so many people I didn't even know were going to be there, that just happened to be there that weekend, and getting to reconnect and have a couple drinks and just go over old stories. It was so amazing. Then person after person, I was one night with those people telling stories about this other friend we have, and like telling all these funny stories of what we used to get up to when he's kids, because he was a bit older, and was a lot of fun. And then sure enough, that guy rolls in the campground. He was just driving through, and he thought he'd just pull down just to see if anybody was there, just kind of check out the old stomping grounds, because he hadn't been in a couple of years. And it's just like, how is this all just happening like this? It's so funny how the world works, and you just have to be open to it. And I think it's all about resistance. And I think they talk about this in psychedelics a lot, of people that do these big psychedelic trips of like ayahuasca and or maybe high dose psilocybin, and it's all about just letting go and going with it, and all the pain comes from resisting. And I think that's the same with life, of just, if you resist along the way, that's where the pain comes out. That's where the frustration, the unhappiness of where you are, and just giving in with it and going with the flow, and trying to make those decisions that allow you to easier go with that flow, just brings amazing wealth and love into your life. And I think that lesson, I've talked about it on the podcast a million times, and then I think I was forgetting it myself and wasn't acting it out. And that was a great lesson for me last week, or whatever those weeks were past, to really do that. And I enjoyed it so much, and it was so good for my mental health. Like I said, I'm not, magically cured by any means. I still have a lot of things to go through, but I was allowed to have some really important pieces that I think are going to allow me to more readily go with that flow and bring some of that happiness and that love back into my life, in a bunch of different ways. So I'm super excited for that. I can't really say what that all is right now, but there's more to come, and probably in the next 1 or 2 weeks, you guys are going to be hearing some really exciting things that I've been, probably cryptically hinting at for months and months, if not since the very start of the podcast. But I think you guys probably heard it in my voice on that solo cast, that I'd kind of made some decisions that some things needed to be happen. I just needed to not ask for permission, and just kind of tell people, hey, this is how it's going to be. And that was a scary but really rewarding experience. And to do that, now just got to put it into action, and to put proof behind my words, and to show everyone that doesn't believe in me that, I know what I'm doing, and this is going to be something special, and I cannot wait to do that. So that's just my little update. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry, it's a little bit of a longer intro, but it's a little bit shorter of an episode this week too, compared to some of the behemoths I've done. So yeah, other than that, all the things I always forget to write down, like I say every week, follow the podcast on social media, Instagram, Twitter, subscribe on the YouTube page. That's really handy. We're getting it updated. There's always new videos going up there. That's really exciting for me. rate, that helps, giving 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to, telling a friend, word of mouth, sharing the post, that all goes a million miles. And I guess just another thing I missed in that was all these reunions and stuff, was just to hear these people that I would expect it from, and people I would never expect it from, to come up and just say, hey, I really enjoy your podcast. Like, I listened to this episode, maybe just someone I'd never even thought in a million years would even give it a chance to even listen to it. Like, man, does that stuff fill you up? And I think so often I just get locked up here in GP where I'm not seeing anybody, and you feel like you're screaming into a void. But then as soon as you go to something like that golf tournament in Slave Lake, or this reunion out in Penticton with all these people you love, you get to feel that, and you surround yourself with that tribe that can pick you back up. And I feel like for so long I've just been, getting knocked down and picking myself back up. And sometimes you just need people. And I feel like that was such an amazing experience. And to see the evolution of certain people that you've known since kids was really fun, and to treat them like adults, and to have a little bit of have a few drinks with somebody that you've known since they're 0 years old, and to see them be a very impressive and mature human being at their own age in their own way, and to see all the things that they're struggling with, that they're afraid of, and just to say, like, oh man, you're a kid. Like, I know I'm a kid too, but you just can't stress over that stuff. But you can't tell them that either, because when I was that age, I was stressing over the exact same things. But it was just so refreshing. It was almost a reminder of how far I've come from being at that point. I really, really enjoyed it, and just had an amazing time. That wedding was perfection in all senses of the word. I can't even imagine, how we could have made that better given the circumstances of what we were up against. So, that's my little update. All those great things. If you have any suggestions for the podcast, please send them my way. Any guest ideas, I always really appreciate those. One of the hardest things to do is get guests on. So any help there is greatly appreciated. If you ever want to start your own podcast, I'm just a call away, Instagram DM away. Love to help people out with that kind of stuff and all those special things. I'm sure you've heard this a million times and all the other intros if you listen to any episodes. And if this is the first one, thank you for being here. I appreciate your support, and I hope you really enjoy this episode, because I can't even begin to explain to you guys how much I enjoyed this episode myself. All right, talk to you in a bit. All right, thank you for being here, Akiva.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
Awesome. It was kind of funny how it all came together. When I first started the podcast, I had all these big ideas. I still do. And I have a big spreadsheet of all the different areas I want to take the podcast. And there was a couple that were hard to explain to other people and were kind of a very personal goal. And one of them was to have a rabbi on the podcast, because I have a lot of personal interest. There's a couple episodes right off the start where I got to talk a little bit about the Jewish faith, and it was really exciting to me. And then after that, I really ran into a brick wall for having somebody on, and I'd almost given up on the fact that I can make it happen. And then just out of the blue, this all lines up, and a couple weeks later, I'm actually getting to sit down with my first rabbi, and I just thought it was so cool how it all worked out, and how par for the course that's been since I started this journey of chasing this podcast, just kind of how things have fallen into place like that. And I just wanted to start off with a big thank you for doing this. And just want to maybe start off with that to introduce people to you. And maybe I can start off with a question of how long has it been since your childhood that you wanted to be a rabbi? Is that something that maybe you've wavered on throughout and then decided at a different time? When did you first kind of have the idea that maybe that'd be something you pursue?
Yeah, to be a rabbi. Well, I wanted to say also, first of all, that I think it's quite wild that, there's so many rabbis out there, but the one rabbi you found is like halfway across the world. It's quite strange how these things work out.
It sure is.
And the one rabbi you found, it made you wake up at 5:30 this morning. So I apologize for that. But I guess the time difference is causes these things to happen. Mm-hmm. How long did I want to be a rabbi for? Well, I grew up watching my dad, who is a rabbi. My father was and still is a rabbi, and I sort of watched what he did, and I was quite inspired by the person that he was, and still is. And it was always on my mind, maybe this is something which I would be interested in doing. Maybe this is something which I think I could, have something to offer.
Yeah.
And I didn't really, pursue that necessarily. I went to quite a religious school where I, was a lot of secular studies, but at the same time, a lot of religious studies as well. And then in sort of the system that I went through, when you finish school, you don't necessarily go on to college, university. You go to what's called yeshiva. Now, yeshiva is where you sit and study from 7 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, literally.
Right.
You have a 2-hour break in the afternoon. You have sort of about an hour in the morning for breakfast, and you have about an hour and a half in the sort of evening for your supper.
Right.
You're pretty much sitting and studying all day, every day. And that to me was an incredible experience. I think it really taught me a lot about my Judaism. I think I gained a lot of respect for the wisdom that we have and that we have to offer. And as I sort of went through that, I ended up going to study in Israel. And then when I studied in Israel, I realized that this is something I really do want to do. I really do want to teach. And being a rabbi isn't just about teaching. It's about being a person who's just there for other people as well. And I guess I just found myself on that path. I guess I just found myself over here. And then when I eventually moved back to England, I got married and moved back to England. That was something which I really wanted to do. So
Right.
I guess it sort of evolved organically in a way. It wasn't like, if you'd asked me when I was 5, what do you want to be? I'd probably say a fireman or something, It wasn't
Yeah,
like-
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm curious about yeshiva because that's something I've heard about. Something that came up in our introductory discussion was just kind of my personal relationship with Judaism, and like you said, it sounds funny to with so many rabbis in the world to struggle to find one. And I think it's just geographically where I grew up in northern Canada. This not just specifically through this domain, but just diversity in general. You don't get a full spectrum unless you travel. And luckily I did get to travel, but it was just one of those things where regardless where we went, this was never really something I came across until I was really into my adult life. And I found podcasting, and I found all these amazing people that told these amazing stories. Like one of my favorite comedians, Ari Shafir, he studied yeshiva and went to Israel for 2 years and eventually went on to a different path. But I always found it so fascinating. And I have a couple questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So what age is that typically that you would do that? Is that some sort of, is that a choice? Like not everybody would go through that process, or is it, and if so, like what kind of percentage of the population, would actually go through that, and what would kind of decide whether you do that or not?
So, good question. I mean, it sort of depends, even within Orthodox Judaism, you have different sort of, you have different styles, I guess, different styles and different flavors. So in some styles, you would have, look, the percentage is always high within Orthodox circles of people going to yeshiva. The question is what age you go, and the question is how long you stay for.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So when I grew up and sort of the school system that I went through, it was almost 100% of the kids went to yeshiva. And it was sort of like expected that you'd go. Look, if you decided you didn't want to go, that would be fine too. And you're not going to get in trouble for not going. But it was almost like something you wanted to do. It's like going to university in a way. It's like all your friends are doing it, and you feel like it's the thing which is going to build you as a person, and teach you more about your heritage. So in my circle of friends, I can't say 100% because you always have one or two that wouldn't do it. But it was almost every single kid went to. And now I say kid because my friends were going to yeshiva at 15, 16. I went to yeshiva at 16. I finished high school early. I took my A-levels, which is sort of like the SAT equivalent maybe in the United States, and went straight to yeshiva after that. So I went at 16.
Right.
I ended up studying in yeshiva for a total of almost 10 years.
Wow.
So from 16 till 25 or 9 years, I think, which was a long time. And I have friends who are still there, so they've been studying for 15 years or so. So there's one of the things I love about Judaism is the fact that there's always more to learn. You can sort of like never learn everything, which is quite human wisdom is infinite, or rather godly wisdom is infinite. So sometimes you've got to just say, you know what, I've got to leave now because I've got to earn a living. I've got to, raise a family. I've got to get married. but sometimes it's sustainable. You can sort of do both. But
Right.
on average, people stay for a few years.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That actually, it's funny to hear you speak, and just how many different things that's clicking into place, and how much that makes sense of all these different stories that kind of parsed together through everybody's lives. And one of the things I heard you say that I picked up on, and that I feel like I've been picking up on, I want to ask more questions on, is you said that it's not compulsory. It's quite often that a lot of people do it, but there's always that option of not doing it. And I feel like that is something I've picked up a lot in comparison of my traditional understanding of what religion is and how it operates. And what I was so used to, regardless of what label you slap on, what tradition you're looking at, before I had found Judaism, it was very much about following and following rules and not dissenting. And what I loved about what I've heard so far about a lot of people's experience that I look up to growing up with the Jewish faith is an encouragement to question and to have discussions and to bring up logical arguments behind why you want to do something, and not just to blindly follow, but to ask questions, and always leaving that kind of door of personal accountability. Might not be the right way to describe it, but there's always this essence of pushing yourself forward and asking these questions and helping create what you guys are worshiping. You're also creating in the moment of expanding that and always working to make it more well-defined. And I feel like what I see that brings out in people, and the skills that adds in their life, it was hard for me to wrap my head around just how actionable that was, because I'd always kind of put religion into this box of, it helps you in this very narrow domain spiritually of how you feel as a person and how you kind of conduct yourself, very, very morally. But what I'm finding through the further and further I get into looking into Judaism and what all comes with it, it seems to be very practically applicable. And I feel like for some reason I tie that to that piece of questioning and choice and having to work for yourself and really testing your mind throughout the process. And I'm just curious, for somebody that understands it so much better than myself, do you kind of, the essence of what I'm saying, of what I see people get out of it, how inbuilt to that, and maybe other mechanisms that I from the outside am missing that also would be adding to that fact, if that made any sense whatsoever? I feel like it's kind of a convoluted question.
I think I get your gist. If I answer and I'm not answering your question, then let me know. But
fair enough. I will definitely ask it again, if not in a different way.
I'm going to just go back to what you were saying right at the beginning about encouraging questions. That was very much my experience growing up.
Right.
Questions were always encouraged. My dad was a rabbi, but he was always very encouraging about us asking questions and not just doing it because he told us to do it. Of course, he strongly saw the value of it, and therefore he would have, he would have educated us in that way. But at the same time, he encouraged us to be free thinkers, which I think was, incredible, because it doesn't always end up that way. I think that, to me, Judaism stands for that. But I think sometimes parents are just a bit nervous that their kids might not follow in their path unless they sort of drive it in a bit harder. So you can have, it's sort of very, it depends on the family, really. It depends on the parenting. It's a parenting thing, really.
Right.
I would have friends whose parents were sort of less relaxed with them necessarily questioning their religion. But I think for the most part, if you look at Judaism as a whole, it does encourage questions. I don't know if you know the Jewish holiday of Passover. You've heard of that festival of Passover? So the festival of Passover, in Hebrew Pesach, is when families get together and we talk about, we teach our children the story of the Jewish people's exodus from Egypt about 3,500 years ago. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and we left, or God took us out, rather, and in sort of in a miraculous way. Yeah. And what we do, amongst many other things at Seder night, Seder night, by the way, is the name of that sort of meal that we have together, or that the celebration that we have together on Passover, on the night of Passover. One of the highlights of the Seder is when the children ask questions. There are questions that the children are encouraged to ask. And in fact, the whole Seder revolves around prompting questions from the children. We want them to ask, why are we doing this? What is this all about? This is strange. This is a bit weird. Like what? Yeah. And that is the highlight, almost the highlight of the Jewish calendar. And to me, that really says it all about what Judaism is looking for. We want our children to question. We want our children to ask. And the truth is, people only learn if they ask. You can only learn when you're curious.
Yeah.
You need to have a curiosity. And when you're curious, you ask questions. If it's just someone filling you up with information, then you are someone that has information but not understanding. And I think questions bring understanding, which is to me really, really important. And I hope to be able to, be the same with my children. They're young still, but I see the value, and massively see the value in that. And especially with my congregants, I welcome any question. I welcome any question from and they know that. They know that they should feel comfortable to ask me anything and everything. And sometimes I'll say I don't know. I'm comfortable saying that. I don't profess to know everything. I don't profess to know nowhere near everything. But that's okay too. I think we're all on a learning curve. I think we're all on a journey. Even the rabbis are on a journey. There's no one that can say they know everything. And that to me is really important. But going back to what you were saying after that about sort of Judaism, I mean, this is what I understood you were saying. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. But to me, Judaism is holistic. It does speak to life. It does speak to life. It's not sort of like a religion in a box where we do these strange things and we just sort of are sort of living. What's the word I'm looking for over here? We're sort of living like outside of the real world. I think Judaism speaks to life itself. It speaks to our relationships with other people. It speaks to how we relate to sort of ourselves, how we see the world. It's not just sort of empty ritual and practices. I think it's very much alive. It's very much alive, and with understanding, we can really feel it, and that's what I see. That's really what I see.
Yeah, that is beautiful. First off, but I do see that as well, and I think that all ties in together. Of that, it seems like the questioning builds in a curiosity about the relationships in the world. And I've talked about this on the podcast many times. It's just funny because the first time we talked, it was so funny how much naturally the conversation went to things that I talk about all the time on the podcast. I think we're very much of the same mind, but it's definitely, and then I lost my whole train of thought, giving myself a compliment there of where I was going with it. Oh, that's hilarious. I'll pick it up again. But I just think it's so interesting how, it builds this curiosity, and people naturally get used to asking these questions, and what that curiosity builds is this relationship with things, right? You're curious about your relationship with things, with the world, with your food, with all these things. And I feel like it's a lot of work to do that, to build these relationships and ask these questions, and to be alive in the world and to build your relationship out. It's a lot easier just to shut those things down. Put them into very neat boxes and not have to think about any of these things, and kind of cut your relationship off, which I think is a huge problem with society in so many ways. People either don't have a relationship with their food, with their people around them that they should be. There's certain things that break them off. And I feel like a big piece of, from what the sounds of it are, is encouraging that, and to build those relationships and making sure that you aren't just, cutting through life, trying not to touch any of it, as little as you can, and just letting in these small pieces that you want to connect with, but of connecting with the whole thing and understanding the whole thing and having relationships. And sometimes to the outside, if you don't understand those relationships, it might look like, tradition or just a way of doing things. But if you understand the reasoning why, and like I talk about having the logic and making it okay to question that, now you start building that, and you build up. Not only are you telling them, hey, you do this because of this. No, do this for this reason and this reason. Do you want to have questions? Oh yeah. Well, good point. But you have to look at it this way, right? And you can kind of build up that intuition within them, that now once they reach a certain age, they can start doing that for themselves and for those around them. And that is such a powerful skill. It seems very basic, but I feel like it's almost, we almost take it for granted, as this is so basic, everyone's going to understand this. And then we have the whole generation of people that come out without it. And we see the consequences played out in front of us, with people that are that cut off with their relationships, with just all these things in their life. And I feel like this is just one way. I wouldn't say that maybe religion is the only way to get to that point in life, but I think that it's definitely, I would say maybe unfairly beguiled of all these things that it isn't, when people don't give it credit for, at its core, what is beautiful to me, of what makes it pretty and balanced, and all the positives that I think we're going to talk about today, right? I feel like that kind of gets missed.
I think when people sort of look at Judaism, let's say, because I can't speak for other religions, but when people look at Judaism, I think what they see from the outside is what we do. And what you'll notice about what we do is the things that look a bit strange, maybe, because the other things you might not see.
Right.
And I think what's often missed is what it's pointing to, what it's pointing us towards. I think there's depth over there, which you won't be able to see from the outside.
Yeah.
And, I totally get why you'd look at, Judaism from the outside and maybe think to yourself, it is just about these strange practices or whatever. But taking a closer look at what we are working towards as a people, what our core values are, and what we've taught the world, I think there is so much wisdom over there, which is to be found if there's sort of an openness to see more.
Right.
But the other thing I wanted to say was you reminded me of a sort of one of our Jewish teachings. It's a quote from Pirkei Avot, which is Ethics of the Fathers, which you may have heard of. It's Ezehu Chacham, who is the wise person? Halomed Mikol Adam, the one who learns from every single person or human.
Right. Yeah.
You cannot possibly be wise. You cannot possibly acquire wisdom unless you're open to finding it anywhere. Anywhere and everywhere, really. Every single human being has wisdom they can share, wisdom about life, things they know that I don't. And if I'm open to finding it there, then I will continue to grow and I will continue to become wiser, and I will be wise already. I'll be wise already. So of course, it's not about having it all, and not recognizing that it's elsewhere. It can be found really everywhere.
Right. And I think that is so important, because I think that intuition is very deep within us. I think we know that on some, whatever kind of language you want to attach this, but some level deeper than what we see every day. We know that, of how true that is, of, the wisest man learns from everybody. And I feel like that is coming from a different lens of religion, coming in from when I was a kid, and it was very much the opposite. It was the wise man learns from the man at the front. No, don't learn from everybody. Don't listen to everybody. Don't ask questions. Listen to this person. And I feel like that is such a, that goes against something that is deep within a lot of us and creates a lot of questions. It did for me, and it had me completely write off religion for a lot of years, because as I got older and as I couldn't question this. Well, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. But at every time you tried to ask those, it was not met with, a loving debate and maybe trying to get to answers. It was very much shut down. And I feel like when I was asking you earlier about the actual actionable skills that the parents are teaching, and you responded with, I think it's very much unique to the people you're talking about, right? I think there's going to be some parents, some rabbis that really take on that aspect of wanting to foster that, and then there's going to be some that maybe, like you said, think they need a different tact to bring them to the end goal. And I feel like what I see, maybe if I can expand on maybe that question better, is from the outside, it seems like there's something innately built into the religion itself that fosters more of the right kind of, or maybe not right to put right and wrong on it, it's just different ways of doing things, but something fosters within the religion itself this idea, because I hear more and more people tell the story when they talk about growing up with a Jewish faith, of having somebody in there where they got to ask these questions, where it's very rare to hear the story of somebody like myself, where I had a loving, went to Christian church and was met with, questioning, and all this was met. You don't that would be a very strong exception to that rule. Whereas on the other side, it seems like something innate built into it. And I'm not sure if it's my guess of just me throwing darts at the wall, is that it's something where it seems more involved on the Jewish side, and everybody's together. And on this side, it always felt like it's very much one person at the front that tells everybody, and we're all at a step below, and it's not very together. Right. And I feel like it's something in there that allows this, for this beauty, because it's a process. It's not just something, like you were saying, it's not just handing knowledge and forcing it to them. That doesn't create understanding, and understanding is what creates wisdom. And I feel like wisdom is the biggest thing that religion gives us at its core, right? Like there's, if you want just pure knowledge, there's the internet, there's some universities, maybe not other, it seems like it might be going on a bad trajectory, but really that wisdom, that really deep thing you get from an understanding and from a process of learning how to learn these things and how to think about them and what questions to ask, is such a vastly different life skill that you can bring. And I just find it so amazing to look at all these people that I really look up to now and get to look back and see. I'm sure that's not 100% of the reason that they achieved everything they achieved. I'm sure it's something that's deep within them as well, but you can't discount it. And I just feel like that is so beautiful for a guy like myself, that for a long time just thought there is no need for any religion. All religions are kind of in this box. Now to re-explore and to put the hat on of just, and explore in these religions. I'm not a proponent of any which one. I pick and choose from each of them what helps. And I just find that the more I look into this box of what you guys got going on, the more I'm thinking like, hey, this stuff is great. Everybody needs to look over here because there's some really good stuff in here. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of just been my role this
Nick,
last couple of years.
You really helped me understand something as you were talking. I was thinking about questioning and sort of curiosity in general. I think it really depends on what your perspective is on the questioner, really. There's two ways you can approach someone that's coming with a question,
Yeah.
And I think I've heard it said about, people who question in other religions that the question itself is coming from a bad place. It's almost like the devil inside of you that's trying to take you away from God. And I think in Judaism, we see it in a totally opposite way. I think we see it as it's the godly soul inside of you wanting to understand. It's coming from like a place, a goodness. It's a goodness. I want to know. I want to connect. I want to understand life. And I think when you see someone coming with that, you can't help but appreciate the question because you know it's coming from a deep and sincere place. But if questions are always going to be met with whatever question comes your way is just the devil confusing you, then there's never going to be a way of satisfying curiosity. It's always going to be stifling. And I think that's a really big difference.
For sure. I think that's a huge difference. And I never really thought about it that way. And it almost comes back to that idea of just that original sin idea that is within so many religions that kind of has that within them of, you see manifestations on the back end of that really old idea that is very innate to the whole process, but you see it come out in certain areas like that where there's this darkness within us and they can be, I don't want to speak poorly about it because I'm sure it's more likely that I just don't understand it, but it seems like they can use that a lot of the ideas of the original sin to be convenient for them a lot of times. And I think this is just one of them of questions. Oh yeah. Anything that pulls you from the path that makes you question your faith, that's the devil. Right. And you hear that all the time. And I've hear that even on podcasts that I listen to today of that's one of the biggest things that people that are questioning or that are within both worlds, because one of my favorite things, I listened to a couple podcasts with MMA fighters. I'm a big fan of MMA, and a couple of them, they grew up in very religious backgrounds in Montana, up in the United States, and now they've left, but their parents are very much within that world still. And they talk about this dichotomy of this wild life that they're living in, these books that they're reading, and these new religions that they're finding, in this amalgamation they're creating of their life, of what's serving them on their journey. And then they talk about the question of how to bring their parents along the ride for them. And I just find this fascinating how much they talk about this original sin and the questioning coming up, because they're doing all these new age breathing techniques and nutrition and all these ideas. And so much of the time they say, well, anything that makes you question the path of God, that is sin. That is the devil. And they always talk about this dichotomy of how hard it is to have discussions because of how stifling that is, to just everything they wanted, all the little cracks that they thought would be the end to maybe bringing more of life in, and maybe not go down one lens, because they all show love for what they have and they're happy for what that creates in their life, but they just want to maybe broaden it a little bit more. But they said every little piece of purchase that they can get on it is filled in with that the mortar of, if this makes you question your faith at all, it's a bad thing. And I just wonder how stifling and how much you can accomplish, right? Like when you talk about what we're trying to create of just this relationship with the world and experience it as deeply as possible with all these relationships, it might be through a very specific lens of how you should interact with this due to thousands of years of, talking about it and debating it, which is the understanding that comes with it. But when you just break that all off the bat and maybe break yourself down to 10% of life, that's what you're going to experience. Yeah. It's sad to me. It's sad to see that people are doing that and maybe not realizing what all they're missing out on. And I think that's why I find just even more admirable to find the religions that do encourage that, because I wouldn't even say that is just strictly Judaism. I think there's some Eastern traditions, Hinduism, I think Buddhism, there's pieces that bring that in. And that's what I find so crazy now, to just dive myself back into all these religions. You can see, that they all have so much in common, but then there's this whole idea where if your idea is all coming through Western Catholic Christian viewpoint, you don't even realize, because of how much those overlap, you think that is the whole idea of religion. You don't realize there's 50 other religions that cover this whole other part of the spectrum that we have no idea about. And that was very not troubling, but eye-opening for me, was to not only to realize that I had written off religion when I only understood maybe like 10% of the overall of what within all the religions, when you look at Islam and everything, and you really take it in. We are so misunderstanding, and I feel like that highlights this, which is something else I wanted to ask you about. Kind of, maybe I'll ask the question first, and then I'll bring it to where I was thinking about it with is over my lifetime. I'm not all that old, 27 years old, but I've seen religion change in the zeitgeist in the West, and I've got to see this happen. And at the time, and to be honest, I think we can both have a conversation about this. It hasn't been the best for religion in the last couple of years, right? It's kind of being taken down at the knees. And I think something like Judaism is so solid upon itself that you probably feel this less, but I feel like some of the ones that are maybe a little bit more weekend warrior types that people can attach themselves, but not very deeply. Like they go to church on Sundays. You see this attack on that, and its place in society kind of changing over these last couple of years that I've got to see. I'm just curious, with somebody that is so within it, obviously a different one, but
yeah,
how has that been for you to recognize that something that means so much to you, and all the attacks purely come from a lack of understanding and wanting to sit and understand what these things are? Does that not affect you because, like you guys haven't even gone to the step of understanding to be able to write it off? Because that's the realization I got to. I had written off this huge piece of it, and I don't even understand it. I don't even have the first step. How ignorant of me, how cocky of me to assume I knew. I have this whole religion thing put into this little box when really I hadn't even smelt religion. I didn't even know what it was at that time. And I feel like that's the experience I personally went through, but it seems like that now, once I understood that, I see it happening on a grander scale. And I'm just wondering what that feels like to be within something that is so affected and unaffected at the same time, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I wish everyone thought like you, actually. I think it's incredible that you see yourself in that way. I think, for me, I don't know if I would be like you, to be honest, if I didn't have the upbringing I did, because it is very easy to get to sort of to find ourselves down the path of thinking we've worked it all out already and I've decided it doesn't make any sense. That's a very easy thing to do. Now, I say that in a really non-judgmental way, because I do understand that sometimes people do have negative experiences. They don't feel like they're being heard. They don't feel like their questions are being addressed. And when you don't feel like there's someone that's there that has understanding and that's wants to listen to you and appreciates the humanness of you, then of course you're going to, drop it. You're going to go elsewhere. I totally understand where that comes from.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by I say that in a non-judgmental way. But I'm very inspired by what you've said. That you've sort of looked back at your life and realized that maybe you were a bit closed-minded about the different things that you sort of came your way, and you sort of have more of a curiosity as well. I think that's remarkable. I think that's really remarkable. You've definitely inspired me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And yeah, we struggle with that as well in Judaism and in sort of with our children, with the next generation. I think it is difficult. There is a very attractive world out there, and it looks very happy, and it looks very exciting, and there is a lot of goodness out there, and and there's a lot of sort of instant gratification where it seems like you can get you very far in a very easy way, and without appreciating the spiritual side of what religion's pointing to, without getting a sense of the fact that this is speaking to my soul, that I have a soul, that my soul is really what brings me happiness, and nothing else really can. I think all those things, without that, with the appreciation of that, then of course the world is a lot more exciting, or rather seems more exciting, and that's what sort of can be very tempting. I'm not saying the world is a bad place. I'm not saying that anything out there is bad. I'm just saying that we can find ourselves thinking that that's where happiness is to be found. Is that where we find our happiness? And really, the truth is, happiness is within. Happiness is within. And to me, Judaism is pointing us towards how to find the things that makes our soul happy. What is it the soul wants to achieve, and what is it the soul makes the soul happy, and it's sort of grounds us in that respect.
Yeah, I think that is so true, and I think that is a huge reason for this all too. Because the way I look at it is, I agree that at its best, and I think that's where you get to see with something like Judaism, I think it accomplishes this goal in a lot better way than a lot of the other things. But at the end of the day, what they're trying to accomplish through, some might argue, convoluted means, but I think others might, in counter argument, you would argue these are just really deep ideas that take a lot of talking about and really understanding to be able to get to. But it's that idea of that happiness is comes from within, and that you can only find that within. That is another one of those ideas that I think people just understand innately, and it hits something inside that just feels very true.
Yeah.
But it's hard and it's scary, and people don't want to realize that, because then they realize that all the negativity they feel and all the sadness and all the anger, they realize that they can't externalize that. They can't blame that on the outside world. But for thousands and thousands of years, we had religion for that natural instinct, that human, and again, you have to have compassion for this one to understand it. Like, it's not that people are bad. It's this human inclination to go for what's easy, to go for comfort, right? That's evolutionary. How we came up is to go to that side. And then in the last, I don't know, let's call it 20 to 50 years, the free reign to kind of buck all those responsibilities, blame it on the outside world, that happiness is external, and the loss of religion has really built into that. And now you look at it in 2021, where we're at now, and you look back and you realize, oh, that religion thing was there for a reason, right? Because now you get to see the downstream effects of all these people that have now had that real deep understanding that happiness is internal, and to pursue that, and to find the pursuit that brings you to that point, right? Which I think is maybe a Jewish idea of, whether if that's through Judaism that gets you to that point, that's great. But whatever gets you there, it's more about the arrival. And maybe I speak too much, or speak from a place of ignorance, because I don't know if that's the idea. But
say whatever you want to say. I'm all ears.
It seems like that is more inherent to Judaism than some of the other religions I've seen, where they would almost yes, happiness is the goal. Yes, it's internal, but we want it to still come through us, right? Where I feel like it's just opening it up to wherever it comes. I feel like that is a beautiful idea in itself, of just recognizing that, happiness is internal, and we have these ideas. Like, what a religion is just, a set of structures that we think helps us along that path of getting to that place where you can find that happiness, it seems. And along the way, that can be corrupted. And like we said, like, a huge contingent or a huge piece of its worth is contingent upon who's bringing it forward. And sometimes the structures have more control over how the message is brought forward than others. Like I was saying, I think it'd be more the exception to the rule to have, maybe questioning not be held to a high esteem throughout the Jewish idea, and maybe it'd be more an exception than a rule to have questioning be allowed in some of these other religions, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is very innate, but at the end of the day, they're all chasing after the same thing. And I feel like this is what I find the more I re-dive into these different religions and try and pull and pick from them, is you see how common they really are, and how there's these underneath threads of kind of that idea of God is everything. God is all of us. It's the cliches of treat your neighbor like they want to be treated kind of thing. Just, if you can walk through the world, whether you intellectually believe this or not, if you can make yourself walk through the world as if your neighbor is you in a different life, in a different skin, right? And there's a bunch of different labels you can put on that get to this idea. I think a lot of what I'm hearing now is a lot of the scientists and a lot of people that have kind of science as their religion, they put it in the terms of, there's some sort of force that we can't put terms on, or we can't put anything on. It's just the universe wanting to experience itself in all these different ways. How does life work as a tree? How does life work as a human? How does life work as a different human in these different circumstances? And everything is just viewing itself. It's just the universe propagating things to experience itself. And that is the same idea.
God without calling it God.
Exactly. It's just God without calling it God, which is kind of where I was getting to. If this is my full journey of writing it off completely, getting it to a point where, oh no, I found God, but I don't call it God. And then to realize that is God. Exactly. That opening the door. Then once I got to that point, and I started opening these boxes again and looking within them, I'm like, oh, I was just being an idiot. They were already saying. So it's
funny, you remind me of a line. I don't know who said this line, because I can't attribute it to anyone specific, but I think it was a rabbi once who was speaking to someone who was very disillusioned with their Judaism and didn't believe in God, or told the rabbi they didn't believe in God. And the rabbi, after hearing this guy out, said to him, you know something? the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either.
Yeah. That is so perfect. That is awesome. Oh, I'm definitely stealing that, by the way, because that is so perfect. I feel like
Yeah.
having a good anecdote to explain it like that is that's so funny. And I feel like that's what I hear in um some of the religious people that have really, you know, taken a big piece of me in the last couple of years is people like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, somebody that is very much on the side of religion, someone that is very much on the opposite side of it, putting their ideas together in an intellectual way and going about it, and having to I feel like within the space of religion, there's either two arguments that can be had. It can be in good faith or not in good faith, right? It can be an argument with, it's usually somebody that also it almost breaks down into believers and non-believers. If it's a non-believer and a believer, it's not a very good faith argument because they're trying to win. But what was awesome was it seemed like what Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris were able to do is kind of put that aside. We're not trying to win. We're just trying to understand each other better.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And what it allowed for was them to define things how they wanted to define, right? Like to say, oh, I believe in God, and have the other person dictate to them what that means to them. You had the person like, I'm not going to tell you what that means to you. You explain it back to me. Let's find the place. And then where that allowed the conversation go, I think that understanding off the hop, but then the length that they had 2-3 hours every night to do it, and they did it over time.
It's amazing.
It was unconstrained, and I just found it so beautiful. The areas it was able to go to, and what it felt like was this is what I was dreaming about when I was sitting in those pews as a little kid and questioning all these things. It was feel like they were actually taking it to those natural endpoints of what my natural curiosity was hoping that it would take it to when I was sitting there as a kid that was, could never sit still for 2 seconds and was locked into the same. It was just so not set up in so many ways. It was just set up to fail, but to know that what they were trying to teach me was available. It just wasn't coming through the best medium. Right. And that's what I love about seeing podcasts, because now religion to me has been brought forward in all these different mediums, through comedians, through intellectuals, through people, through religious speakers. Right. And you get this amalgamation of what the painting looks like, instead of just this one narrow looking at it through a straw kind of idea of what it is. And I just find that it's so much more applicable and so much more directly impacting my life now that I can take the pieces and have all these different areas to bring it in. I just feel like that is it's a beautiful thing, and I'm appreciative of it. And I'm just wondering, and I'm curious to have conversations like this, because I feel like it expands the ideas of how that comes together. And I feel like someone like yourself can take so much of that, because that is at the end of the day what your goal is, to spread these messages of the good, the best parts of it, and to raise that up. And I feel like there's so many lessons to learn. Like, we did amazing with what we had for thousands of years with the ways of propagating this message forward. But now in the last couple of years, the game has changed so much, and it's opened so much that if you're open to adapting with it, I feel like the message can just be spread better. And some of the negative aspects of what I think the biggest negative aspect is just geographically, if you're not having access, if you're up in northern Alberta and there's these people that are thinking these ways with this really amazing way of thinking that's going to help you, but you'd be cordoned off about it or cordoned away from it. Now that's not the same, right? Like, somebody could listen to, a rabbi in the United Kingdom talk about these ideas in Northern Canada, and they could pick it up. I just find that so beautiful, of just the reopening of the door for people to explore these questions for their own, which is the real, at the end of the day, like we said, it's the journey. It's about exploring these questions. That's the whole point of it, is just to push yourself to open up that relationship with the world and start exploring it like that. I think that's awesome to think.
Another element of just curiosity and asking questions as well, and encouraging that, is that when you encourage curiosity, you sort of awaken people to the wisdom they have within. Yeah. I think when people are curious, they sort of almost find the answers themselves. There's another great quote from the Talmud. The Talmud is sort of like another Jewish book of wisdom, incredible wisdom. And it says, She'elat chacham chatzi tshuva, which means asking a question from a wise person in and of itself is half the answer. Yeah. I think when you have someone that listens to your question with a genuineness and with a sincerity, then the very, the very curiosity itself within you awakens answers. It awakens answers within. And I've experienced that myself, where sort of I'm asking someone a question and I just, in the way they listen and the way they're just genuinely interested in helping me find an answer, they don't need to say anything. Yeah. And I sort of, something makes sense to me as I'm asking the question. And I think encouraging that really awakens people to what they have already.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that goes back to something I don't think we talked about on the podcast, but I think it was in the first introductory call.
Yeah.
Something that we were talking about was the different ways of getting to that point. And I think that that is a beautiful entryway to it, but I think we can expand on it too, of this
Yeah.
innate wisdom that we have inside of us that we touch into. And I think that's one of those ways of having a trusted person that you can let all your walls down to ask the question, because sometimes in your own head, you're so worried about how things come across and what you can and can't think about. There's so much going on. It's like a whirlwind inside each and every one of our heads, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but my guess is that it's more, right?
Yeah.
That the act of having someone that you trust, it allows those walls to fall down and you to ask it and start to, and you raise yourself up too, because you want to ask this in a way of somebody that's going to respect it. And you're not going to get laughed at. It forces, it brings the best of you in the moment and has those fall off. And sometimes just in the way you ask it, the answers come to you because you deep down, you did know it. And the human animal is amazing at compartmentalization. And that comes with, information. And if you've heard me talk on this podcast before, my whole theory of where this comes back to. I think evolutionary comes back to our idea of becoming conscious beings and being able to contemplate our own deaths, built this innate ability to compartmentalize things away, because if we didn't, we'd never get anywhere in the world. We'd sit around the campfire as cavemen, just thinking about the fact that we're going to die one day. And it's so fundamental, but it gave us this amazing ability. But what that does is now we've had thousands and thousands of years of wisdom and real deep knowledge, right? These things that we talked about already, a couple of them today, that feel, you don't know why, but they feel really right to you. And I feel like something like religion or something like having a trusted advisor can open this up, but then you can find ways to hack that inner wisdom too. Because one of the things I was telling you about that I found is meditation. Something about sitting for 20 minutes and just calming yourself right down to take all the noise and all the signal away. That inner wisdom seems to bubble up. And sometimes there's just a problem that you have been thinking about, or a relationship issue or something at work. And you'll find this amazing, amazing wisdom of what to do in that situation that you knew deep down. You just didn't want to, for whatever reason, there was something blocking you from accessing that. And I find that there's so many different ways. And for some people that's going out for a surf or getting into a flow state. It's about just quieting the noise in some way. And I just feel like it's so beautiful, the pursuit of that, and to see all these different areas and to add more tools to your tool belt of what allows you to tap into that. Maybe it's a state of mind. I feel like sometimes on this podcast, if I get into the right state, I can start accessing some of those things. And it feels like I'm talking from a different place than I am in my normal life. And I feel like it's a fun thing to explore. I don't know when or what is going to tap me into it. It's just about kind of chasing it and trying to each and every day. And if you do, hey, maybe you were into it that day. Okay, what did you do? Did you meditate before that podcast? Did you eat right? Did you do all these things, and trying to build a scaffolding around it of touching into it, which is so funny because I feel like that's what probably my understanding of probably what built most of religion in all these different religions is doing that same thing of finding what works and building scaffolding around it to try and recreate it. Right. And that probably happened for thousands of years, and there's probably some real value to it. And I feel like it's just so there's so much hubris in thinking that we understand it and that we can just throw it away. These thousands of years of
I mean,
work that we put together.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I mean, you're really helping me get deeper understandings as well. But,
appreciate that.
But sort of the way I see it now, at least as you're talking and as I'm thinking more, is that the sort of we are, and Judaism very much sees this, and this is sort of the reality of every single human being that roams this planet, is that we are made up of two parts. We are spiritual beings. We have souls. Those souls, the souls that we have, given that they're spiritual, and they have infinite wisdom. We have infinite wisdom inside of us. We also have another side to us, and that's the body. Now, the body is what gets in the way. It confuses us. And when we're in a state of confusion, it's because there's a lot of noise going on inside our own heads. Now, our heads aren't the spiritual side of ourselves. Yeah. And when we learn to quiet that noise inside our heads, we access a depth of wisdom that we have already. Now, we tend to forget that, and we tend to try and work things out in our own heads, and that's when we get ourselves in a mess. And I love what you were saying about just finding that quiet time, because when we quiet the noise, it's almost like that spring, that spring of wisdom just is free flowing. It just happens naturally. And the sort of the journey through life is learning to quiet that noise, really, and learning how to sort of let that spring just flow in its own way, because it will if we just let it come up. We sort of block it, sort of suppress. We suppress it, and confuse ourselves, and sort of get very analytical about life, and that sort of gets in our way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is the natural mechanisms that we don't even realize that it is. But because we have so many things compartmentalized, it's the analogy I always use is, there's inside the head is a house, and there's all these rooms that maybe people don't want to go into, and
Right.
and maybe whole sections of, maybe whole wings of the house that they've never got into. But it's very important to do that work. But sometimes when you get into a new wing and your body recognizes, holy man, he's getting close to that trauma room. Let's bring all these things up. Let's confuse him. Let's do this stuff. And so much of that is our natural reaction to protect ourselves. It's a self-preservation mechanism that, oh no, I'm going through too much at work to deal with these personal issues. I'm just gonna, have a couple extra drink after work every week this night to kind of tamp it down. I'll get through this, and then I'll work on those issues later. I'll work on that later, right? And there's so much of this that is one very thin lens of looking through what that could be. That could be a million different things. That could be video games, or that could be, just telling yourself a very sad story about how hard the world is and how all these things are on you, that you don't have the time to do this work. But then people don't understand of how much it perpetuates itself, and not dealing with it is going to bring up all these other issues that will manifest themselves too, and how much happiness and growth can come from asking those tough questions and sitting with those tough questions and quieting that noise and really getting in touch with yourself.
Well, here's the thing, Nick. Here's the thing. I see the soul, given that it's spiritual in its nature, I see it as untouchable. Nothing does affect the soul. It sort of is the purity that it was when we first sort of received it, so to speak. So the soul never gets traumatized. The soul doesn't have anything wrong with it ever. And I think the more we identify with our souls, the more that noise that you were talking about, all those different rooms which you don't want to go into, are almost like less relevant to us. We sort of recognize that's not the real me. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
That's sort of like a figment of my imagination, so to speak. I'm not dismissing what people go through. I think it's very real.
Yeah.
But I think that as we access that deeper part of ourselves, then, all that stuff sort of doesn't feel as real anymore.
For sure. I completely agree with you. And I think I can add to what I was saying to incorporate that into it. Cause I agree wholeheartedly I think I'm trying to think of a way to welcome that into the already analogy I have set. I feel like walking through it alone is scary in that house, but you're right that there's an understanding that takes all the fear away of just understanding that at the deepest level, the only pain and the only reason those things hurt is still within you. You are the only reason, the reactions you have to it, the trauma that you're carrying, the ideas. Yeah. You're not damaged in any way. It's just it's unworked.
It's going on in here, basically.
Yeah. And what I found is there's something to self-love of really truly loving yourself and having acceptance for those things. Now it's not as scary to walk through those. There might still be some scary rooms that are not very fun to go through, but when you have that understanding, that's that life vest, that's that flashlight that you get to come through that dark house with and shine some light in that corner, and you know that you're okay. And it's that understanding that, monsters aren't real. Everything I created is within this. I can't be harmed here. My soul, like you say, the soul is untarnished. If that's the word that you want to use in that situation, like we've talked about a bunch, I think you can put different labels on that, right? But if that's what you wanted to look at it through, is that understanding of that love for yourself. As long as the only things that hurt you inside of that house is your own wounded self. If you love it, if you have love for yourself and a love for that piece of you that's always there and that is eternal, none of that can affect you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those chicken and the egg things. Is it going through those rooms and cleaning up and creating love, and the only sword that you get to walk through that house with is a sword of love, right? The only thing you can do to help these things is to show love for them, right?
Yeah. It's just compassion for yourself, basically.
It is compassion for yourself. And it's where the chicken and the egg thing comes is it finding that love for yourself that allows you to go through that work and do that work, or is it doing that work that creates the love for yourself? And for myself, it's been too intertwined these last couple of years of going through that to be able to separate which one is which. But definitely they go together. I figured that much out, and definitely there's nothing to be worried about if you can fall into that. And I think there's probably a lot of things within religious manifolds or within a lot of things that can give you that first burst of self-love, or maybe it's a new relationship. Maybe it's something else that can kick it off.
To me, Nick, I think just the way I see it is that it's almost like the understanding itself almost like does the work for you in a way. Like the deeper understanding that we have and the deeper sort of realizations that we have, it almost like that is the work. That is the work, It's sort of like it's a new perspective. It's like, I don't need to fix that because actually I see it differently.
Yeah, I can just have love for it.
Yeah. Or it's not as real as it looks anymore. And therefore I don't need to fix it because it's not there.
Yeah. Very true. Very
Yeah.
true. And yeah. And I think that's kind of what it is it's a whole mixture of things. It's just that understanding of starting to work on it. And some things you don't want to change at all. And you realize that I love that in myself. That's something with me of going through this, of finding, like one of my big things I bring up a lot is my anger issues. And I've gotten so much better with them, but at a certain point I was so trying to change them. But I think, the only thing I found that worked is just to love it. I love what my temper has defended me. It has helped me get through this life. It's helped me stand up because I'm also a very polite person and I don't stand up for myself a lot. And I feel like that anger is something that I love because I trust myself enough at this point that I'm not going to use it. And when I do use it inappropriately, I feel I have my body tells me right away, hey, maybe there's a better way to handle that.
Yeah.
But in the last couple of years, I've been pretty okay. I found that, not just reacting to, okay, I have anger. That's bad. Anger's bad. I need to demonize this of just having it. Okay, did that serve me or not? And that's not of all these things, whether it's anger or all these things or, ego, asking all these questions of, okay, did that serve me in that situation? Do I need to bring this forward? Do I need to work on something there? Or am I okay with what brought that out in me and how it influenced out? And I feel like that small change of just, I don't have to fix everything. Allowed so much more progression and so much more actual, right? And not progression in the way I thought it was going to be.
I love that example. I love that example. It's like you've seen your anger differently, and as a result of what you've seen, it just automatically changed. It's sort of your relationship with it changed without you having to work hard at it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that opens up the door to now because now anger isn't this big scary thing that you need to wrestle and get under control anymore. Now you can have a conversation with it. You can say, okay, well, why did you get so angry there? What triggered it? Oh, well, when I was a little kid, I always got told, maybe somebody said something at work and it made me really angry. And then you can ask those questions. Well, why did I get that angry? Well, when you're a kid, you always got bugged for this or this. And that's probably a little bit of that. And then you can go kind of like, oh, now you have compassion for yourself. And you think back of like, oh, that poor hurt kid that's still coming out. Like, let's work on this. Let's get over that because it's not that big a deal. And you can kind of see it in the moment. And you almost learn to laugh at yourself in those moments. And it just gets so much better. And you start to learn so much about yourself. So it's
funny because I'm totally with you on that. I just skipped that first stage that you were talking about.
Right.
It's like, I actually don't care where it comes from. It's not relevant. It's just my brain taking something in my head a bit too seriously and me getting all worked up about it. So like, where does it come from? I don't know. And the truth is, the more I start getting into it, I probably get really stuck in that. It's like, and I get really stuck in a rut about my childhood or whatever it is. I'm just using that as an example. My childhood's actually very cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like just recognizing that it's coming from something which isn't helpful in and of itself is helpful. If you get what I'm saying.
For sure.
Like, okay, there's something out there which is, which I had come my way in my head, which I took very seriously and as a result reacted. You know what? I just have to recognize that that's the way my thinking works, and to me that's just that's a lot of. It's easier. It's kinder to yourself, but that's just my way.
No, and I think that's beautiful, and I think that's probably good because I think what's so powerful about podcasts like this is it allows different people to say their own personal journeys through something that is very personal to those people, and everyone's going to go through it differently. And I definitely hear what you're saying about it's more about understanding that it's not something that's serving you in the moment, even if you don't take those other steps of taking it through. Where I would maybe push back on a little bit is what I've found is the benefits of going through that work of asking those extra couple steps, understanding that if you're walking the right path, it probably won't matter because you're just in recognizing it is all that's worth. But what I found is it helps me so much later on. If I do that work of say finding what triggers me into anger, then it might be a meeting 2 years down the road where somebody says something I recognize, oh, that probably would have really triggered me at this point, and I'd be angry right now, but I'm not. I'm still in the comment. I'm still thinking logically because everybody knows that there's some sort of relationship with logic and emotion where it's not 100% one-to-one, but definitely the more emotional you get, sometimes the logic centers shut down a little bit, and it allows you to stay within that space of recognizing that. And then maybe you see somebody else get fired up in the meeting, right? And you recognize it. And then you start seeing your own shit. Oh, they're upset. They're not actually upset at what he said. They just responded the same way because they probably have something similar. Humans aren't all that different as much as the media tries.
Compassion for others.
And
compassion for others as well. Yeah.
And it allows you to, in real time, to, instead of, if you back this up 2 years ago, I would be so reactionary myself that I wouldn't even recognize it in other people, and reactive. Now you almost learn to interpret through the emotions the logic of what the people are trying to convey, and you become a better communicator because you can start to recognize the things in yourself. And I feel like just it sucks to ask those other questions and to do that work, and you can get stuck in it. Agreed. Right. But I also see that there is value in recognizing those things, because later on they will come back to serve you. You can start to recognize those in others and help them maybe shorten the time of pain and suffering that they go through in those little instances of those reactionary times. Cause that's never fun for anybody. Like that's what I feel like people have lost this understanding of. Most people are pretty nice and they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And most times when something gets said and somebody gets hurt, it hurts both parties. It's the rare human being that takes pleasure in hurting people's feelings. Not to say that does not exist in the world, and that's not something you have to keep your eye out for. But like if I ever hurt somebody's feelings or think back on it, it'll stay with me for 3 days. Even if it's just like a passing conversation with somebody at a gas station, right? Like if I think back on it, that I might have hurt somebody's feelings. And I feel like people don't recognize that is more often than not people's modus operandi. And I feel like the internet and how people communicate really shuts that down, and people think that people are something that they're not. But I just, I wish more people could just operate from that place of compassion that we've kind of been dancing around with all different types of this conversation, where it comes in and out of just, there's something about just having that love for people and understanding that life is really hard and has a lot of suffering in it. And there's a lot of things that are hard to work through. If you understand that for everybody, now you can just have a little bit more compassion. You can have that take that extra second before you react, and just understand that, you know what, they're probably going through something really tough. And you can add that on to just whatever the latest thing that's going on in the world, right? I think there's been a lot to point to as of the last year and a half that, hey, people are probably going through something normally, but this is just something extra. Everybody's dealing with just that extra thing that's on their shoulders. And just what I match that with is, all right now I need to have extra compassion. If there's an extra weight on everybody's shoulders in the world right now, you just got to put on that extra weight of compassion, because if you have compassion for others, the weight of the world lifts off your shoulders, because now you're doing it for others. You're not doing it for yourself, or you're still doing it for yourself because others are yourself, right? When you get to that point of recognizing that this isn't a selfish, or if you get far enough down that road, everything is selfish and nothing is selfish, because if you do things for others, you're helping yourself, because those are you. That is just, the universe's way to experience it. It might be less directly linked to you, but you're still doing it for yourself. Right. But at the end of the day, you're not doing it just for yourself, because helping everybody helps everybody. Right. And
you can't have a relationship with God without recognizing that there's, what you've just said. You just can't. It's without seeing the godliness in other people. How are you going to see the godliness in God?
Right.
It's right. Like, and it just, you can't separate one from the other. You really can't. And Judaism very much sees it that way. It's that it speaks to not just how we sort of relate to God, but it speaks to how we respect and have compassion and see the godliness in other human beings. And those are very much two equal fundamentals within Judaism. It's very relevant to this time of year, in fact, because this is the time of year which is actually a period of mourning for the Jewish people. There's a 3-week period of mourning which we have once a year, where we think about the temples that once stood in Jerusalem. Now, those temples were places where Jews were able to worship, but not just worship. We are told that there's places where you could really feel God's presence. God is everywhere, but there were places where God's presence was like palpable. You could sort of feel it. You could experience it. And they got destroyed. The first one got destroyed by the Babylonians. The second one got destroyed by the Romans. And the rabbis are sort of questioning, as rabbis do, as we spoke about. Rabbis like to question, why is it that it was destroyed? They're not asking, why did the Romans destroy it? They're asking, why did God feel that we deserved for it to be destroyed? What's the reason? Why did God take it away from us? And they said, the reason why the second temple was destroyed was because we had baseless hatred for one another. We didn't respect one another. We didn't appreciate one another. And I think that's very much speaking to what we were talking about. It's like, unless you can see the godliness in someone else, unless you can have the respect for another human being, then you can't possibly find God. You can't. It starts down here. It starts with your relationship with people. It starts with your appreciation of everyone being the same, of everyone being a soul. And God basically was saying, if you don't have the respect for each other, then you can't have me either. And bye-bye. The temple got destroyed, and God, so to speak, took a step back, and we find it harder to find him. He's still
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
He still very much wants to have a relationship with us, but we Jews believe that he is almost like, they call it in sort of Kabbalistic thinking, he's hidden his face. He's hidden his face. He's no longer sort of as visible as he once was, and that's that to me, that's the Jewish journey right now. It's finding our love for each other, finding love for ourselves, and re-experiencing what the soul really truly desires. See, I don't see Judaism as, you're talking about religion, and I don't think there's semantics really. You know where the word religion comes from? I was reading this recently. The word religion comes from, I believe it's from the Latin, you can check this up afterwards, religare, I believe, which means to be bound, to bind, to be, tied up.
Yeah.
Which is very much the way people see religion. It's like, it's restrictive. It binds you. It holds you in place. It sort of doesn't let you be free. Judaism sees itself as being the exact opposite. It allows you to be what your soul truly is. So it's pointing us towards a truth about life. It's pointing us towards what life is really all about. And it's pointing us towards something that the soul already knows.
Yeah.
It's just that it doesn't realize it. No, it doesn't. Well, our bodies don't quite realize how to access that.
Yeah.
And so it's not about creating structure. It's not about, coming up with techniques which help us do things in a certain way. It's about doing, it's about living in a wise way.
Yeah.
It's about accessing wisdom. So it's not so much a way of life and how and sort of the things that we do. It's about how to be. It's about how to be souls.
Yeah.
And we very much see that in Judaism. It's that every single one of we have 613, which is a heck of a lot. 613 commandments. We think of 10 commandments, is actually 613, and each one of them is something which the soul very much resonates with. And that's very much the journey through Judaism is trying to understand the wisdom behind it.
Yeah.
And through understanding it, the soul sort of reconnects to its source, which is God. Now, I hope that wasn't too deep and too,
No, I love that.
But that's to me. So that's why I don't see it as a religion.
Yeah.
I see it as it's pointing towards the truth behind life.
Yeah. And what I loved a million things within that, but just to start with kind of where you started with the name, right? Religion and to bind, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing that struck me there of the most, the nicest interpretation I get and the most meaningful is to bind people together, because what I was saying earlier about just kind of this thousands of years of this glue that was holding people together in this one thing, and it wasn't perfect, and there's all these things that come out of it, and there's a lot of bad things that have been done in its name and all that stuff, because humans are naturally human and we have different sides of each other. But I feel like that is so much of the current adrift feeling for a lot of people. I think it'd be very different for you because you didn't really lose this, but I think for a lot of society, with losing that thing that binds us, right? That idea of we are all the same and we're all doing these things, it's us in another body, that real idea that binds everybody together and makes it so that you always want to look out for your neighbor. That is a sense of loss that we've gone through. And I don't think we've processed, but I think that is, in reality, a big piece of what we're dealing with today is feeling the repercussions of that loss. And another thing I was hearing you say of, if God is in everything, is everywhere, and is in all of us, how can there be, places like you say where you really feel like you're in touch with God and it feels like it's a godly place. And that follows perfectly for me, because I've always had this intuition. This was much before I found this. This was kind of back in my days when I was in between. I was kind of had religion written off and was trying to figure out my own thing. And then I realized that the thing I came up with on my own is pretty much in reality what religion was. Again, the word semantics, but of all these religions, at the core pieces, the things that I like of them are trying to say to me anyways. But where I got to is, yes, everyone, God is in everyone, God is in everything, and we are God, and everybody else is around us is God, and that type of idea. But or to put it in the terms of kind of the scientists, right? The God without God kind of idea of what the universe, whatever that force in the universe is that wanted to manifest this manifestation and put me through all the things that I went through in life to experience what life is through my lens. that the life of experiences, right? Like that is one thing. And it's not just from the time you're born to the time of that now, those 27 years. I've also affected others in that time, right? And then I've put those strands that are also me, but I've had more of a direct impact, right? The direct impact on the me's or the God that is, in maybe all of your friends over in the UK. I haven't touched them very much. I haven't had very many connections. We are the same, and there's all these tendrils that connect everybody in the world. That's kind of how I envision in my head, is we're all connected, and they might be thin. They're always powerful. They're unbreakable because it's something that is ineffable. But my family and my really close friends, I'm interacting with them, and those bonds are getting stronger. The God or the me that I am in this body with those experiences, I also, it's a feedback loop effect that more of my small little brand of God that is not tainted, that's the wrong word, but experienced with everything that I've seen and everything that I've felt in my life. I get to have that feedback onto me because I give that to people and they give it back. So now you have all these tendrils coming out to you that connect to every other person and every other tree and every life form, right? Threads are maybe a bad example, because it'd be going to everything. It'd almost just be a force, or like waves that are going out. And it's about deciding who you want, because that's also a conscious choice of who are you giving those things to and getting it back. Who are you really tightening those connections with? And it highlights the importance of those you keep around you, and the type of mental diet that you want to be taking in. Are you taking negativity? Are you trying to help people? Are you trying to surround yourself with people?
No, when you sort of emanate, when you give off positivity, you're right. It does just sort of reflect. It comes back at you. It reflects back at you.
Yeah.
There is a verse that says, I can't remember where it is. I should, because I'm a it says, Kamayim panim el panim kain lev adam, as water is to a face, so too is the heart of man. The way when you look in water, your reflection just comes straight back at you.
Yeah.
That's the same is true with the heart of man. It's like when, our hearts sort of work in the same way. We reflect things out there, and then it comes back at us. It's sort of like there is that effect.
Yeah, there definitely is. And just to follow where I was coming from, is that makes sense that there'd be certain places on earth where the connection is two ways, right? And it's not just between people. I think that is a kind of a narrow-minded way to look at it. It's everything. It's places. It's things. It's the entire world. It's the entire universe of whatever this all is. It's all experiencing in itself. And sometimes those areas allow feedback that the people are getting something out of it too, and they're pushing back, right? And it creates these places that can be special. And I think it's funny to hear that, that might be hard to explain to people of why certain places and certain temples hold that idea, but just innately the idea that I have that matches up perfectly with kind of my understanding of things that I just came to intuitively, which I think is just, it adds to that level of just what feels true. And I just love, I get such a pleasure to finding those areas that tap into something that's true like that. Like it's just, and something I've been really loving with this podcast is I find if I have a couple hour conversation with someone, at some point we're going to tap into one of those truths. And it's just taking that moment and just enjoying that like today has been worth it because I didn't just toil around on the first level. We got down to the second or third, and we really touched closer to that truth. You're never going to touch it completely, but you've gotten close. And to start changing your world instead of, I think maybe so many people do this is they calculate the day by maybe how much money did you make that day? Was I successful? Did I get a good post for social media to make it look like I had this amazing, right? So many people these days you see go have a whole weekend extravaganza just to post about it, right? They're asking themselves all these things, and it's about changing the mindset of what you're valuing the day. Like, and what I'm saying that I'm finding is if I start to change the value of how close did I get to that truth today? How much further, how much deep work did get done or that arrived today? The happiness that comes out of that of just changing your vectors just slightly from money or fame or all those other things that are very tempting. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a reason that people chase after those, and you have to have compassion for that, but also just to show the positive side. And I think the only way is to show through example and to have these types of conversations to try and show people that there is value in that, and to chase that is so much more rewarding in the long term than maybe the dollar or the Instagram post today. And that's a very hard thing to get people to understand, to those natural iterations of yourself into the future that you're working towards, the delayed gratification that's going to make you a better you 5 months from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, of how much value there is in that, other than, chasing what is going to make you feel good tomorrow or the next day or the next day after that. I think that is the bigger idea. And I think there's lots of things that could be related.
Well, I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing that you see it that way. I like I said before, I'm very inspired by the fact that you've sort of found this yourself. I'm always humbled by people that come across these ideas themselves, because I was taught it.
Right.
I was brought up with this, and I'm always blown away by people that weren't, and yet found these understandings and sort of found a deeper truth within. I feel like that's incredible. That's unbelievable. And then, keep on going with that. You're gonna really touch a lot of people if you keep on sharing these ideas. And I really appreciate that you've invited me on here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just, I can't completely take that comment because like we talked about before this call on the introductory call we did, I'm just parroting these things that I've learned from others, right? Like so many people like Lex Friedman, like the Weinstein brothers, like
but you were on a search. You were searching for something.
I was definitely on a search, and definitely that articulated these people that I found, and the more people that I would find, it was along the same search that brought me.
And
there.
when you look, you find. I mean, you're an example of that. But when you're genuine, when we're seeking, there's no such thing as not finding something.
Which is and it's so funny how that seeking can take place, because for me, I was seeking a rabbi to have this exact conversation with for months and months and months and months. And as soon as that seeking just turned to, you know what, it's going to be what it's going to be. It'll work out. Not a week later did this start to materialize out of nowhere, of just having that, giving up the reins and just saying, you know what, what'll be will be. And then it comes through fruition like this. And then for the conversation to be all that I'd hoped for and more. And I think we kind of already had a feeling this was going to be a conversation, because I think in the half-hour introductory call, it probably could have been a podcast in itself, just the ideas. And I learned so much from you in that first call. I've learned 10 times more in this conversation. And I really hope that you enjoyed your time having a conversation.
Very much so.
And that maybe we can do it in the future sometime, because I have about a million more questions to ask you. And, instead of the questions getting,
I think it's really cool. I love the fact that we come from very different backgrounds, that you live on the other side of the world, and yet we can connect in this way. I think it's amazing. And,
awesome.
It's just insane.
Yeah, it is really. Yeah, if you think about it too hard, it'll make your brain hurt a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I won't take up any more of your time. I know you're busy, but we'll definitely try and do this again in the future, because I think this conversation has a long way to go, and I think we can definitely push both of our ideas.
Yeah, we'll do episode 2. I'm up for episode 2.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's all I want out of these is an episode 2. So thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right, that's episode 89 in the books, getting close to that episode 100 with my dad, that I know he's excited about. I'm excited. I know, actually, after we've mentioned it a couple times on the podcast, I've had some people come up and say, hey, man, I'm really excited for episode 100. Probably people that know Ingo and are excited for it too. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and I'm hoping that it's not just me that felt that deep connection of kind of some of the topics we were talking about. And I hope that it really resonates with a few people. If that's not you, if you didn't like it, that's fine too. I think that's going to happen with some of these podcasts. It's very rare that every podcast, when you do 90 or 100 or 5,000 or whatever it ends up being, that every single one is going to line up with you and speak to you personally. But I really appreciate the people that it's going to speak to, and I hope that it helps them in some way or in any way. And if you do maybe listen to it and it does speak to you, or it doesn't, whatever, if you just try and keep in mind, maybe there is somebody that you know that maybe this would speak to. Maybe you think that some of the topics that we covered really line up with something that you've heard maybe a friend discuss, and you see their eyes light up like that. Maybe pass it on to them, see if they'd enjoy it. And I think that's what really helps these podcasts grow, is just having somebody take that time that, you know what, maybe I haven't talked to this person in a while, but I think they'd really enjoy this. I'm just going to send it to them. If they never listen to it, no worries, but at least I tried. And I think that is what spreads these podcasts and makes them impactful, and it has a special meaning. Then when that person does listen to it and does enjoy it, they know it came from you. And I think that's something that maybe gets underappreciated a lot of times. I love giving good recommendations. It's one of the biggest reasons I know I hate saying it's one of the biggest reasons I started this podcast, because I say it all the time about such different things, and I have so many reasons to start the podcast, but definitely one of them was wanting to be able to give recommendations. I love not wanting nothing more back from it. Just, you want somebody to have that same enjoyment out of something that you do. That's why when
I have a hockey player on and we're talking hockey, I'll bring up Spittin' Chicklets 600 times in the episode, or I'll bring up Joe Rogan or Lex Frieden, 6 times a pod. It's just one of those things. I just want people to get that same enjoyment, that same life-changing information that it was for me, because that's what it was for me a lot of these times. These were life-changing podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever it is that I found. I just want you guys to enjoy that as well. And I hope you guys can hear my little puppy in the background going nuts. She had lots of freedom sleeping on the bed with us over vacation, and now she's getting back into routine. She's throwing a bit of a hissy fit, so we got a bit of a devil dog on our hands, but that's for me to deal with, not for you guys. Apologies if you guys can hear them. Like I say every time, give me a follow on all the social medias. That really helps. Pass an episode on to a friend. Apologies. Do all those things. It really helps. Rate, subscribe on YouTube. Leave a comment. Give me a like. All that stuff really helps. Thank you guys. You're awesome. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye.